In this episode of Ask a Griffin, we talk about the 4 keys to negotiating the sale of your property. So in this episode, we want to talk about the 4 keys to negotiating the sale of your property, because this could lead to you selling for more money if you understand these 4 important points. And they're really stages. Now, let's revisit the fact that, again, this is the single largest emotional transaction most people will ever make in an entire lifetime. And you see that that is really a recurring theme in all of the stages of a successful property sale. But there is none more important than to start off with this again: control. You must control your emotions during the negotiation phase. Now, we've gone through all of these other phases in preparing for sale, marketing, there's some communication, but now we have an offer. And especially if that offer comes in for less money than you were hoping for, or you think the property is worth, and you almost get to the point where you're personally insulted. You take it personally. I know how this feels. It happens to me too when I sell my own properties. But you must learn to control your emotions in that moment. So especially when the first offer comes in, take a beat. Unless, of course, it's a great one. Then try to control your euphoria, making sure you're looking at the other details of the offer and not getting too excited. So number 1, to become a great negotiator for the sale of your own property, you have to control your emotions. Number 2 is you have to understand, before the process of negotiation even begins, you should have been well prepared on what the price range might be, because the final sale price will definitely be in the reality range. Yes, the range of reality, not this delusional price that we make up emotionally. That's the whole point. If you look at the cycle of a proper property sale, you see that we discussed pricing it right to begin with, and we dealt with how to establish the reality range. That's a very key critical point, is that there is plenty of data out there that you want to consider preparing to price your property. Now, of course, we talk about this. Everybody likes to cheat to the high end of a pricing range. The danger and the mistake comes when you cheat out of that range where there is no data to support it. Now, there are occasions where that might be reasonable. If you have a very extremely unique property and there's absolutely no way you can compare it to other properties, including just on an absolute value basis. In other words, if it's a $10 million unique property, would I spend $10 million on that property or something else? Okay? Only in those circumstances does the data become much more difficult to take into account and find a reality range. It's much more of a fishing expedition. But for most properties, there is a range, and it's based on math. Find it, because the final price will fall inside that reality range, and you want to remember that while you're negotiating. Okay? Number 3 is you want to stay connected with why you're selling. So many people begin by wanting to sell their property for a particular reason. And that can take some time. Gee, you know what? I think I want to finally sell this property. I want to downsize. I want to move up to a bigger property. I'm relocating. Whatever the reason is why you began to begin with, you have to stay connected to that. Because when the emotions are out of control and we lose sense of reality, it's really because we've forgotten altogether why we did this in the first place. Why are we going through such a huge emotional and financial transaction? Because. That's the operative word here. So get reconnected to that. As this offer comes in, say, okay, let's breathe. I don't like that number, but I did want to move for this reason. And what that does is it has a calming effect. So you can reconnect. Yeah, that's right. Okay, it's time to move on. I get this. Because we all become emotionally attached to the property, no matter what, if it's a primary residence, okay? So you want to get back to why. Take that beat as well. And then ultimately, I'm going to hold off on this one for a second, and I'm going to look right down the barrel, and I'm going to say the only deals that come together is where both parties said yes. So you must think, in this case, in a win-win scenario. So many people feel like this is a battle. And this is a game. It is a game to a certain extent. It's a game of emotional control and knowing, really being properly prepared to win the game. I suppose that's true. But ultimately, regardless of the circumstances or one side or the other, maybe one is more pressured to sell and the other's not so much to buy, and people can be more patient on one side. I get it. But ultimately, regardless of all the external or internal emotions that are really driving this, you have to think win-win. Now, I see in my experience that this point is probably the biggest mistakes that especially sellers make in the very end of the negotiation. Nobody wants to be taken advantage of. Nobody even wants to feel like they were taken advantage of. So again, being properly prepared for this whole negotiation phase will give you a greater sense of control, a greater sense of the inside knowledge, if there is such a thing, because ultimately this is a very individualistic process once it comes down to negotiation. So let's summarize these points again. Again, the 4 keys to negotiating the sale of your property, and the reason why we want to talk about this, it will lead to you getting top dollar. Number 1, control your emotions. Don't get out of control emotionally, or you'll lose any sort of advantage you may have. Number 2, the final price will definitely be in a reality range that for most properties can be found at the beginning of this process before anything ever happens. Number 3, stay connected with why. Why are you selling? That's perhaps the biggest point right there. Why did you begin this process, and why are you at this phase now? And number 4, think win-win. You're not going to beat anybody up. Sure, maybe one side gets a better deal because the other has to make a sale. I understand that. But think win-win. Ultimately, the marketplace will find the price within a few percentage points. That's really where the magic happens. Stay calm and get it done. Hey, if you like this episode, we'd appreciate it if you shared it along to somebody who might need to know about this. We just appreciate you being here watching. Thanks again.